Outward's Definitive Edition was just released on the 17th of May, and I have played it trying to keep an eye on what was new. I have now played enough to give you a solid and honest first impression. A more in-depth review will be coming, but I need more game time for it, as I have not yet finished the DLC content, and Outward is quite a vast game. For those who do not know what Outward is, and want to know a little bit more about the game, let me quickly sum it up. Outward is an RPG that describes itself as an adventurer life simulator. It was released in 2019 and had 2 DLCs delivered that gave the player big batches of content. The game can be played in solo or co-op, and has been one of my favorite games of all time. The Definitive Edition is a way for the developers 9 Dot Studio to give us the best experience possible in Outward by revisiting some mechanics, adding some new content, and merging the DLC content with the rest of the game for a more seamless experience. I have been covering what we knew before the release on my channel before, but I must first say that the Definitive Edition has way more content than I expected it to have. Let me cover for you a few points that I have noticed without spoiling anything. The lighting in Outward has always been a very important thing, as part of the core gameplay relies on it. Some areas are dark and you have a lantern strapped to your backpack to deal with it. In the Definitive Edition, the lighting has been improved significantly, from an already solid base. The shadows are sharper and the color palette feels warmer. I also have noticed that they have changed some water textures, and it is now more translucid and has reflection in some places. There has been some other visual changes that make the game overall look better. Some areas like the Antique Plateau look a little bit washed out, but I think the change is definitely a positive in general. Combat has been smoothed out. It feels a little bit less clunky. I cannot pinpoint the exact reason why, but I feel like you get locked less time in animations, allowing you to react faster. The balance changes they introduced feel pretty alright and make heavy armor a more viable option than it was in the past. Let's just talk about a few new things. I've had a blast exploring the game again, as they introduced a lot of new unique enemies that serves as mini bosses. To sum this up, every single major location that had no mini-boss before has one now. The new enemies are very diverse and look fantastic. I will not show you anything that has not been shown yet in this video, as I really want you to have this discovery feel I had. There are a few new diseases, and I've encountered some new death scenarios. These feel way more interesting than the old ones. This really helps tell the story of your character with some new player interactions. I have also uncovered a few new secret additions into the game that I will cover in another dedicated video. But let me just tell you that the games feel way more rewarding now than in the previous version. Some highly requested features have been secretly added into the Definitive Edition, and I was not expecting that at all. I cannot wait for the discoveries the puzzle solvers will bring to the light, as I suspect the Definitive Edition to be full of surprises we might not even expect. Let's now talk about the integration of the DLC content in the base game region. As expected, the most important change comes from the integration of the Soroborians DLC. You can now do enchantments without ever going to the Antique Plateau, as most of the ingredients for the simpler enchantments are now in the base game regions. Corruption is now everywhere, though, but you can easily find ways to deal with it in the base game regions too. Bombs and special arrows are now pretty easy to come by in all regions, and some of the new foes are now everywhere. The game now really feels like a whole, which is a great change. I can also tell you that some places have been slightly modified, and I've started exploring the giant interconnected dungeon in the Soroborians DLC, and the progression and even layout of some areas have been changed. So it's a good time to revisit this place, as you might get lost as I did, just like I explored it for the first time. There has also been quite a few quality of life changes that make the game more understandable and welcoming to new players, like linked stashes or the improvement of the crafting menus. Let's end this first impression video with a few negatives and my conclusion. Some old bugs from the base game carried it out in the Definitive Edition, and though I have not really encountered game-breaking ones, I still think some of these should have been patched a long time ago. That being said, the devs said they were still going to do bug fixes, and I'm not too worried about this. Though I think the game is more clear and understandable now, I also think the general difficulty slightly went up with the corruption being in far more places than before, and small reworks like the Vendaval quest improvements. The balance changes feel great, but might make it slightly harder for new players. Not a major rise in difficulty, but a small one. As I said, the new lighting makes some areas look a little bit weird, but overall it's an improvement. And one last thing, the worst change of all. Why is the symbol of a bandage green now? Change it back to red or I uninstall this game. Jokes aside, let's get to the conclusion. The Definitive Edition is a great improvement in a lot of ways. More things to discover, a more logical and connected world in general. I was already excited for the Definitive Edition, but it definitely lives up to the hype and brings us more things than I expected. If you want to come back to Outward or want to give it a try, I recommend you take the Definitive Edition, as it is very worth it. I'll come back to you with some specific guides regarding the DE and some new content showcase. I'm excited for Outward's future, and I think the DE is a very good way for the devs to go work on new projects. Thank you all for watching. If you like Outward content, then check out my other videos. Most of the people who watch my videos are not subscribed yet, so if you like what I do, don't hesitate to subscribe as it helps me more than you think. I'll see you again, bye.